Hey, what's up, everybody? Tom Henderson from RESGEN here, and welcome to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, integrating our faith into every area of our life, and talk about ways that we as men can give life to others, at home, at work, and in the community. You know, not many homeschooled preachers' kids with finance degrees quit their steady, well-paying, health insurance-providing budget analyst jobs to be a stand-up comedian. But that's exactly what my guest today did. Andrew Stanley is a follower of Jesus, a husband, and a comedian who performs all over the country at clubs, festivals, fundraisers, churches, corporate events, and even at bars with 4 people in them who didn't know that there would be comedy that night. In addition to that, he was also part of this year's RESGEN Date Night Comedy, which took place on February 29th and March 1st. On today's show, Andrew and I have a lot of fun discussing many topics, including what got him into comedy, what he personally finds funny, how his first year and a half of marriage is going, and what it was like growing up in a family where both his father and grandfather were well-known pastors. I have no doubt that you're going to enjoy and have a good time listening to this episode. So let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Andrew Stanley. Andrew Stanley, welcome to Sioux Falls and the Giving Life Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, now this is fun because you were, as I said in the intro, you didn't just fly in for this. Just
for
to
the
do
podcast?
Yeah.
This is the main reason.
Yeah.
But we were able to book some other things around it. Yeah.
But you're a part of Date Night Comedy here for the last couple of nights, which has just been awesome. So, and this is the first time you've been to Sioux Falls, yes?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Where's Mitchell, South Dakota?
It's about an hour west.
Would I have flown into here to go there?
Yes.
Then okay, I did that.
Yeah. Did you do the Corn Palace?
I went to the Corn Palace. That's where the Corn Palace is. Yeah, I remember the Corn Palace very well.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
I mean, I was about to explain what a Corn Palace is, but I think everybody kind of gets it.
Explanation not necessary.
Yo, you Google it if you want to see it, but it's a Corn Palace.
Yeah. And were you amazed? That was
nice.
Thank you.
I was. I think there were a lot of families there that day. They were like, what is this lone man doing here? Because I'm just in town alone. It's all kids and parents, and then I'm just kind of lurking around, just be looking at the different corns, you know?
Yeah.
But I got a mug. I have a Corn Palace mug that I still use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, now you're gonna have 2 mugs from South Dakota because you're gonna have the Corn Palace one and you're gonna have the RESGEN one.
This one is nicer, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe this one's not made out of corn though. So
yeah. A lot of stuff's made out of corn. We don't know. Every now and then you look at stuff, you're like, is this from corn?
that is true. All right, well,
so I have not been really here, but I came here to go to the Corn Palace and flew back out from here.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that this time you were able to stay for about 48 hours or so, experience Sioux Falls, experience downtown Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be a lot of fun today. But before we get into all this, I'd love to have you introduce yourself because the RESGEN, a lot of the RESGEN audience, you know, or some of them were introduced to you this weekend at Date Night. But for many, this will be an introduction to who you are. And so I'd love for you just to give a little snapshot of who Andrew Stanley is, and then we'll just roll and see where this thing goes.
Oh gosh, Andrew Stanley, stand-up comedian. That's the main part. We got married a year and a half ago. Husband, Christian, preacher's kid, homeschool survivor, man, from Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
main stuff.
That's good. That was a bullet point introduction.
Yeah.
I like
particular order.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most man first.
Yeah. That's good. So, okay. So you mentioned stand-up comedian, and I always love to just hear stories about how people choose their profession and how sometimes the profession chooses them. Sometimes it's the parents that help choose the profession for their kids and so forth. But I'd love to know, like, just your journey towards being a stand-up comedian. Because even just saying, like, listen, this is what I do. It's not something that you do on the side. It's something that you do. Like, this is your full-time, passion, profession, all that kind of stuff. But it's not always what you did.
Right.
So tell me the story about how you got into comedy.
Yeah, I never saw this for myself growing up. I introverted, like I said, homeschooled, not the class clown. I think my close friends probably thought I was funny, but that was about it. And I don't know. I went to school for finance and graduated, got a job as a budget analyst at a big company in Atlanta, just a cog in the cubicle machine, working every day. And I always thought I was funny, but I didn't know how that could be a job. I remember growing up watching The Office, the TV, the American Office, and I always thought whoever's writing this is probably like got the coolest job. Whoever's in a room with other funny people coming up with things for these characters to say, that's got to be the coolest job you could have. And so I remember being interested in that, but having no experience with, I'd never written anything and never trying to write a joke. I just thought I was funny. And so started to reach out to people that we knew that were in the comedy writing industry and got connected with this guy in Nashville that had written for some comedians and some TV shows. And he said, all right, I'll help you. But before we start working it, why don't you go ahead and write 5 minutes of jokes and do them at a stand-up comedy open mic and then send it to me. And then that'll kind of be a good starting point. And I was just like, I do not want to do that. I've never once felt like being on a stage. My dad and my granddad are both preachers. Never wanted to do that. Probably subconsciously just because I didn't like being in front of people. And now this guy's going to make me do the worst version of that. But I really wanted him to help me. And I was a little bit excited about the writing part of it. So I started trying to write jokes, and I would send them to him. And he was very helpful. He's an awesome guy. Scott down in Nashville. He used to do stand-up, but now he's just mostly writing. And he would help me understand some of the fundamental things about, he's like, all right, this is funny, but you need to put this first and don't say that too early. And, think about how you could tie this one into that, just stuff. Saying, hey, don't wear shorts on stage. All the main stuff, the stuff you don't know when you start, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I wonder, glad I learned that from you telling me and not me doing it. Yeah.
Don't wear shorts.
Oh, there's a book about stand-up comedy, and the title of the book is "Don't Wear Shorts on Stage." I don't have it, but I heard about it.
You didn't need to read it. Well, because you were told.
I already knew that. I already know this. It is stuff like, hey, when you take the mic out of the mic stand, move the stand behind you. Don't just let it be in front of you, between you and the audience the whole time. That's how comedians can tell somebody's first time doing stand-up is they'd never move the mic stand. They take the mic out and they just leave it sitting there. But he helped me avoid some of those first beginner mistakes. And then I did my first 5 minutes at the Laughing Skull Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia, where you have to, it's a seedy bar with women in lingerie on the walls, and you walk past a big old phallic statue to get into the restaurant, go back, and I'm the only clean comedian out of 25 people doing their 5 minutes, and it didn't go great, but it went well enough that I was like, I would do that again. I think I could do better than that. And so I just kept doing it. And then you start to make friends, and then you're like, all right, where are the other shows in town? And then the comedians are like, oh, we do an open mic over here on Tuesdays. And you're like, all right, I'll go to that one. And then you kind of get ingrained, and then I started to get opportunities to do stuff in churches, and I was like, oh, I didn't even know people do this, but this is kind of my two things that I like. Yeah. And it just kind of all naturally kind of avalanche from there. So I quit my job about 2.5 years later, and I've been doing this ever since.
Wow. So you would have been, so when you first connected with Steve Dunn, is that what you said his name is?
No, now you got it in my head.
Sorry, I got mixed up with names, but the dude from Nashville, so I'm just even thinking about how you got connected to him in the first place.
Yeah, I got connected to him through, so it's always weird to tell my story this way, but growing up, we knew Jeff Foxworthy. He's in Atlanta, and he and my dad kind of knew each other. Okay. We went on a mission trip when I was 12 to Kenya, and Jeff and his daughter came on it. So I have a picture of me and Jeff in Africa when I'm 12 with braces with all those African kids. Because we're in a village where the clear Americans, and then just a bunch of shirtless African kids running around us. But when I wanted to start doing stand-up, I reached out to him, and he took me to lunch, and he connected me with Scott. Scott
Dunn, thank you.
because Scott had worked with Jeff on some games when he used to do those game shows. Scott was one of the people that would help write jokes for that stuff.
I see.
He's used them for comedy projects. And so that's how I got connected with Scott.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's interesting. And I was going to actually ask you about Jeff Foxworthy a little later, because some of the conversations that you and I are going to have at this table, I actually reached out to some mutual friends.
Oh, great.
Some guys that have known you for many years, guys that I've connected with over the last several years and become friends with. Okay. Two guys in particular, Johnny W., another comedian, and Stuart Hall.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that Johnny W. said, hey, you got to talk with them about being mentored by Jeff Foxworthy and just some of the stories that came out of that relationship and mentorship, and just how that really was helpful for you, just on the relational and the professional end.
Yeah, well, I'm always hesitant to tell people that's how I started, because they're always like, how do you get into stand-up? I'm like, well, you just got to get like your really well-known preacher dad to connect you with one of the most successful comedians of all time, and then just go to lunch with him. And that's the main way. So it's always very unhelpful to people. They're like, how do you start? I'm like, well, I don't know how you start, but I use a lot of my connections. But the nice thing about stand-up is that they don't laugh because of who you know or who you're related to. You can't, no matter, Seinfeld says, like, they give me 5 minutes of grace on stage, and if it's not going well, then they're like, get the next guy up here.
Yeah. And he's probably afforded a lot more grace than someone that's brand new. I mean,
oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. Is
yeah.
He gets 5 minutes of the crowd being excited that Jerry Seinfeld's here.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, do this stuff.
So how much grace does a new person get?
Oh, gosh. Well, the thing that stinks about starting stand-up is that the first shows you do are the hardest ones. When you're new, you do the worst shows. It's the only ones you're allowed to do. You have to go up in front of the drunk people or just rooms that are just other comedians waiting for their turn to tell bad jokes. And so it's the worst audiences when you're the worst at it, which is bonkers way to learn something. Like, you have to beat the hardest level first in a video game, like that. Then the rest. But that is kind of how it is, and that's why a lot of people don't keep doing it, because the first level is kind of the hardest one. So yeah, zero grace.
Yeah.
The only caveat to that is there are comedy classes you can take, and I didn't do that, but I do know that a lot of people like doing those classes, because you can learn stuff in those classes. They're not, I kind of go back and forth. It depends on who the teacher is, if they're worth doing or not. But the good thing about those classes is there's a graduation show at the end. A lot of them are like, we do 10 weeks, and then the last one is a show where everybody invites their friends and family, and you get to perform in front of a very friendly audience.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows this is their first time, and it's all the friends and family of everybody. So a lot of comedians will start by taking a class, do their graduation show, feel really good about themselves, and then they start doing the open mics, and they're just like, this is way different.
My mom's not here to
than when my mom was here. Yeah. But Jeff's been great. Jeff is, we touch base every now and then, and he's always been super gracious to me when I have a question or all that. So
who else has been just someone that's mentored you, like whether that be up close or even from afar?
Yeah. The whole comedy world is so, for the most part, pretty supportive of each other. And you have a lot of access to people above you and below you that I think in other industries you probably don't, because there's really not that many of us doing it full time. And I mean, you get to open for people. As soon as you're funny, you can be open. You could be in sold out theater opening for somebody if you're funny enough. And you could be doing something for 5 years opening for somebody that's been doing it for 40 years. And all of a sudden you're in a green room with somebody huge and you're like, how did I get here? But in terms of like mentors, I don't know if it's been like that, but I mean, your peers are the ones that help you the most, I think, in stand-up, because those are the ones with you every night. You're doing the same stuff. You're getting the same season. You're trying to figure out, how does this work? Oh, I saw you did a show at that club. How do I get them to know about me so I can do that club? And so your peers are kind of helping you the most when it comes to opportunities and stage time and working on jokes together and stuff like that.
I think that's an interesting thought, because really that's just like any profession, really. Like those people that journey with you, that you're bouncing ideas off, that are encouragements, that are that maybe know you to, it's good to have mentors. We always need people that can kind of speak in, but the power of a mentor is built on a relationship to how deep they know you and how well they understand, like even just personality, quirks, characteristics, all those kinds of things that they can just journey with you and say, hey, have you thought about this? And then you're watching, I mean, you're all watching each other and taking notes and figuring out just tips and tricks and tools from one another.
Yeah. And part of it too is like, if I say, hey, Jeff, how do you, if I called Jeff Foxworthy and said, how do I get famous? He'd be like, well, I don't know how you do it now. Like, 'cause it was way different when I did it.
Yeah.
Like it's all changes so fast. Like, back then it was get on the Tonight Show or, sell a lot of CDs.
Right. Yeah.
It's like neither of those are very helpful now.
Right.
But now it's, go viral on TikTok and get on Instagram and chop up your material into 1-minute clips and try to get millions of views and sell tickets.
Yeah.
And so the people that are one step ahead of you in stand-up are probably, in a lot of ways, are the ones that can really tell you what to do because they're like, yeah, you just did this. How did you do it?
Yeah.
But they're also, I don't want to discredit, I do have a lot of people that have helped me a lot. Like whenever I have big questions, John Christ has helped me a lot, especially him kind of coming from the church world too, but also developing a massive audience. And Leanne Morgan has been super kind to me, Kathleen Madigan, all these people that have been doing it a long time and are killing it, are super generous with their advice and wisdom. And Greg Warren's another comedian that's I love, that's just always answers the phone, answers a question, no matter how dumb it is.
Yeah.
So it's I was pleasantly surprised at how friendly comedians can be to each other. And of course there's exceptions.
Yeah. Was there like an intimidation wall you had to break through even to like say like, okay, I feel like I can call this person and I can ask them this question? Or is it just like, no, you feel like there is this openness, so it's not a big deal?
I'm always on the side of don't reach out. You just don't want to hear from me. And my wife will make me call people. Like, just ask them. I'm like, I can't call them. They're like, you've opened for them 6 times. Why can't you call them? I'm like, no. And then Johnny W is another one. I remember Johnny helped me because I was at my day job still. And I remember going into a conference room at our office in downtown Atlanta and locking the door and calling Johnny W and saying, hey, how do I know when I can quit my job? And Johnny helped me they talk through like the pros and cons of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And because I knew he'd been doing it full time for several years and was in the church world, getting booked at the type of stuff that I wanted to get booked at. And so he's another one that was definitely helpful.
Mm-hmm. As you look at just other relationships that have been helpful in your journey, like when I know that, your folks have been very supportive of your career and so like when you would go and you would talk with your dad, for instance, and just say, so Dad, I'm thinking about quitting my job and going full on. What was some of the advice or some of that, how that conversation really play out?
I think he always just wanted us to find something that we love to do. And it wasn't like I, out of nowhere, was like, I'm going to become a comedian. I'd been doing my job and my stand-up for like almost 3 years at the same, like simultaneously. And so the whole time he thought it was cool that I was doing stand-up, and then I started making enough money that it became like I wonder if I could do this, like only this. And so he was was on board the whole time.
Yeah.
I remember I was the last one to decide that I should quit my job. My now wife was my girlfriend then, and I was like, what do you think about this? She was like, I've been telling you to do that for a year.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, my parents will talk me out of it. My parents were like, yeah, do it. Why not? You can always get another job. I'm like, gosh, so somebody, can I find anybody to tell me not to do this? So if anything, it was me that was holding on longer to that safety net of a stable career.
Yeah. And do you think that was just because, it's a big deal when you figure like, okay, I'm going to fully step into this. I'm going to put full trust in myself to establish a brand and trust that I can actually go and do this. So, you had the support of others, but you had to kind of overcome that mental hurdle on your own and say like, I really can do this.
Yeah. It was one of those things where it's like, all right, been working steadily for like a year where every month I kind of make a livable amount. And it was October and I had good bookings through like March of the next year. And I was like, it's like half a year. If I quit now, I could at least be a full-time comedian for 6 months. And I can always just come crawling back or find another job. So let's try that. And then it kind of just, the runway kept unfolding in front of me, thankfully. And I didn't have to do that. But yeah, definitely scary. But it wasn't like I had burned all my bridges. You know, that was a lot of the safety. It was like, all right, I have a finance degree. I had 3.5 years at this job.
Sure.
I think if I need to explain why I have a year-long gap in my resume, pursuing my dream as a stand-up comedian is probably not going to eliminate me from getting another job.
Yeah.
It wasn't as risky as it probably felt to me, but at the time it felt like a big risk.
Oh yeah. Well, it's a lot of times because, I mean, it and that's what courage is, right? I mean, being able to make steps or have the conversation or do whatever, despite the risk, and face it and say, hey.
And I was like 25. It's easier to make that leap when you're single, 25 with 2 roommates sharing one bathroom, no expenses. And, you know,
sure,
I wasn't killing it at my day job, so it wasn't like I was a huge gap.
Yeah.
Dropping off.
Okay.
But I was a budget analyst too.
There's another one above me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're good.
Yeah.
So you launched into that world, and then how soon after you went full time did you get married?
Oh, that would have been almost 4 years later.
Okay.
So yeah, because October of 18, I got married in September of 22.
Okay. So you were dating the entirety of the time while you.
Yeah. We had not been dating that long when I quit my job.
Okay.
Which is fun.
Yeah, and she stayed with you. That's how you knew.
I think we'd been dating like 4 or 5 months or something. I think we started dating like April. And then in October, I was like, I guess I'll quit. She's like, go for it.
Yeah.
She was in school. So I was just like, why not? Neither of us have a job.
Yeah. I think this could work out. Yeah. Okay. So now fast forward, you've been married 1.5 years. And which obviously you've achieved veteran status.
Yeah, as I said last night to all the married people, I just feel very qualified to be here speaking to you.
Yes, you're in the process of writing the book, the marriage book.
Yeah, I finished it 6 months ago, but I worked editing.
Yeah. So the question of, so how's the first 18 months going is such a huge question. But so let me rephrase it to something about like, what's been the biggest surprise or maybe the most interesting thing that you've learned in 18 months of marriage? Like maybe some expectations that were met, or that like things that are like, oh, I didn't really even think about that. Or
that's a good question. I think I knew this was going to be part of it, but I did learning how selfish you are. It's so easy to be selfish and not bump into anything when you're single and just run around traveling all the time. And it's just like, then you get married and live with somebody and you're just like, oh, everything I do affects somebody else now more. And I've just been mostly doing what I want for a while. And now it's more to factor in and learning how to be a good husband and not just say yes to things right when I want to do them. Instead be like, hey, let's have a conversation. So I think learning how selfish I was and adjusting to that was probably one of the surprises. Living with her is fun, but definitely different than having a roommate.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there've been any like major surprises, but it's been a blast. I've loved it.
Yeah. And she stays home.
Let me make sure that's what she told me to say.
Yeah. She's an attorney, right?
Yeah.
And so she obviously has a job that requires her to be in the office at times and work from home and all that. But yet there are times when she can come and travel. She didn't come to Sioux Falls because Sioux Falls is not on the hot list of probably, hey, if Andrew ever gets called to go to Sioux Falls, Mitchell maybe, because I could have seen the Corn Palace, but Sioux Falls, I'm not sure.
She was like, is that where you got that mug that I've been trying to get you to donate?
But
I have donated a lot more stuff since we got married.
Right. She's like, this doesn't go. This isn't necessary.
I've had to go back to Goodwill to look for some of my stuff. That's the thing about traveling. She stays home and I think she just goes through the closet every time I leave.
The house gets lighter every time you come home. You're like,
you seen my favorite shirt? She's like, which one?
So there are times though that she has been able to travel with you.
Oh yeah. Whenever it makes sense, she'll come. Yeah, anywhere tropical, she usually finds a way.
Yeah, no kidding.
We plan a lot of our vacations around when I get booked and fun places to go, which is frustrating to her sometimes because she's like, why don't we plan a trip to here? I'm like, well, I'm going here the next month. Why don't we just do that? She's like, I don't think that's how we should plan our vacation. I'm like, that's fair.
You know, I thought that is such a good thing. I remember, and a lot of times there's cost that's a factor in some of these discussions, right? But I remember when my kids would say, they're both in college now, as you know, but they'd be like, well, we just know that our vacation this summer is going to be wherever Dad happens to be speaking, right? And so like, well, Dad's speaking in Detroit, so we're going to tack on like 4 days.
Yeah.
But the problem with that, and so I think I just want to affirm the conversation that you're having with her now, because you're having that proactively rather than reactively, which is good. Because what I realized is that I enter that vacation with a work mentality and a work mindset.
Yeah, it's very different.
Totally. And so like you're not necessarily unplugging at all and investing full into the relationships that you really want to.
Yeah, it's not what a vacation is.
Correct. And so, I mean, that's one of the advices that I always give to anybody that's like does any kind of traveling or for business or whatever. It's hard to turn the performance thing on or off. And my personality is very much like, well, yeah, I can go here and maybe while I'm on vacation, I can connect with this person. Maybe we can record this thing. Yeah, maybe we can do this. We can do whatever. But I've had to really discipline myself.
Yeah, there's times where that's okay and times where it's not.
Yeah.
The other thing about that is Anna will sometimes be like, I think I just really want to go on a trip. I gotta get out of here. And I'm like, that's the last thing I want to do. I've been out of here.
Yeah.
I've been traveling 8 nights. I just got home. I don't want to go anywhere. And she's like, well, that's not really fair. Like, I've been home the whole year.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is fair. That's my selfishness thing of like.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Like, but I have been traveling. I don't want to get on another airplane. I do that all the time. She's like, well, I would like to go. Like, yes. You're right.
You're right. Yes, honey. Let's do that. Let's look at the travel site right now. Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that that you're both your grandfather and your father were in the ministry.
Yep.
Pretty well known individuals from the ministry. So what was it like for you as a kid? Growing up and even just being a teenager in a home with maybe ministry and pastors that were the more high profile. Like what was that experience like for you? Because I think a lot of times, just you hear the stories about pastors' kids in general.
Yeah.
Right. And just the challenges that can be for a child. I know that being someone who's been in now full-time ministry almost 25 years, there were times when my boys would say, Dad, you just want me to do everything right. You want me to be perfect because of how it, reflects on you.
Mm-hmm.
And just as a dad, having to be like, man, am I giving off that vibe? Am I?
And you have to be like, is that true? I don't think that's true. Maybe it's true.
But that self-evaluation and saying, and then having that real conversation with them. So I'm just interested for you, Andrew, as you're, growing up with a grandfather who was well known, and then dad as well as in a large church. What was that experience like for you?
Good. This is my answer.
It's a one-word answer, Tom.
Yeah. It's always hard to answer because I didn't know anything different. So it never felt weird. It just felt kind of how it is. My dad grew up in a similar situation with my granddad. So I think he was very intentional about trying to make that as non-weird as possible. And it never felt that weird. There were times where I felt like maybe a little more eyes were on me because of, being in a preacher family and people watching to see how I behaved. But I was naturally wanting to behave well young man.
Yeah.
So that helped. I liked behaving. Yeah, my brother, on the other hand, did not care for it much. No, it wasn't bad. We were talking today, and I think I do think that preachers' kids in medium to small size churches probably have it harder because it's so much more of people knowing who you are. And in a big church like we had, you could kind of disappear a little easier. We never felt like extra attention was getting drawn to us. Certainly certainly made our small group leaders nervous to have us in their group, probably.
What are they going to say?
They're just like, okay, I guess the preacher's in here, son's in here. I remember my brother in middle school punched a kid in the face at middle school group. And they were so nervous to tell my dad. And they told him, and he was like, why would you not tell me? Yeah, I didn't know that my son punched a kid in the face. But
is he older or young?
He's younger.
You're young. That was your younger brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I wish I had a better answer. It didn't feel that weird. My dad made it pretty easy on us, and I always feel like there were more advantages than disadvantages.
Yeah.
It would go out. We didn't eat out that much, but when we did, sometimes people would come up to the table and say hi, and that felt cool.
Yeah.
Felt like, oh, we're bored of it. But no, not too much weirdness.
Did you ever feel pressure about going into the ministry at all? And not necessarily put upon you, but just internally? Because again, just going off of just, and I'm just thinking about just in the conversations that I've had with my boys, right? And how like my eldest son was like, well, Dad, I guess I just always kind of figured I'd go into the ministry because that's what you do, that kind of thing. So, and that facilitated a conversation, much like I'm sure that you just talked about having with your dad. Is like, I just want you to find what you're passionate about, follow the Lord, love the Lord, make faith your own, and do what you want to do, what He's called you to do, and roll with it, So, but did you feel that pressure at all, like inside of you ever?
I think I always say that none of the pressure came from inside the house, but people always ask growing up, they're like, are you going to do the family business? And
that's a good point.
My answer is always kind of like, I don't think so. Like, I don't think I'll do that. I never had I think part of it is I never thought I would be good at it. I don't know why, but I think I just never felt like, yeah, that's what I should do. But I never felt like that's what I should do, but that's not what I want to do. It always just felt like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't know why, but I never really felt capable of it or pressured into it. Mm-hmm. But I always knew I want to be a Christian. I want to lead a small group, and I want to be in ministry personally, but I never saw myself necessarily doing it as a job.
In a full-time status. And I love that you said.
And now I speak in churches every week.
Right.
Yeah. Comedy. But
yeah. And I love that you said that though, Andrew, because again, we're all called, if we're a follower of Christ, we're all called to ministry.
Right.
And it's just not our full-time gig. It's just our full-time lifestyle. We do what we do with a high level of character and to the best of our abilities, and just say, okay, God, let me just live out my faith. So as you think about just your faith, was it just something that you just naturally grew into, or was there a moment where you said like, man, okay, my faith is my own. It's not my dad's. It's not, my brother or my mom's or whatever. As influential as they've been in my life, I want to make my faith my own. Was that a certain point in your life where you said, yep, that's when?
Yeah, it's always tough growing up. It's tough to not feel like I have like a big testimony or anything, because you feel like you kind of slide into it. Because you grow up in the super, Christian known family, and I got baptized when I was 8. But my parents were always very intentional about making sure that we had adults that were not our parents speaking into our spiritual lives.
Yeah.
Even though my dad and my granddad were these big spiritual religious leaders, it'd be like, yeah, it seems like that's who your small group leader should be. My parents were like, no, they need to have their own faith. They're going to have their small group leaders. They're going to go to small group. We don't need to ask them what to talk about. So it was probably in high school. I started, I had a, youth group that we would go to for high school on Sunday afternoons. But then my 4 best friends and I would go to our, this guy that used to work at North Point's house, and he would do a small group with us on Wednesday nights. And that's when we got super deep into the Bible and reading books and study and accountability and all that stuff. And that's when my faith really grew the most. Probably was in high school with those guys on Wednesday nights, and then, going to camp at the beach and getting inundated with the spiritual high of being in Panama City Beach with thousands of other high schoolers.
Oh yeah.
and all that. That's definitely when it was like, all right, I feel like this is my own. This isn't just something I believe because it's our family tradition. But it is hard to make that distinction when you're in a family that's like, it's the default. And I think not just preachers' kids, but people that grow up in Christian houses. At some point, you have to make that delineation of like, all right, this isn't just what we do as a family. This is what I choose. And so, yeah, it was definitely high school for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because you're so right, and that's a decision that every single one of us has to make. And then even just and as couples and newly married couples, and saying, okay, so now we're going to establish our home in a way that the foundation is faith, but yet, I mean, our faith is not each other's; it's our own, and now we move forward as a married couple in that. So, okay, so I promised you that I was going to have some questions coming from guys that we mutually.
Oh yeah, I've been nervous about that.
Yeah, I did brief you a little bit on it, but so I'm going to start with just some of these, and I kind of stole a little bit of thunder because I asked the Jeff Foxworthy one from Johnny just because it's a natural bridge since you brought him up. But the first one from Johnny was, why is Johnny W so incredible?
Yeah, he convinced me to quit my job. That was great. That's the main thing I like about him. No, Johnny's amazing because he could do. I'll answer the sarcastic question. Johnny is so talented in stand-up, but also like every time I see him and then he pulls out the guitar and he sings, I'm like, oh, he's like a good musician.
He is.
Most comedians that have a guitar are like, oh yeah, you learned how to play guitar so you could do some of these jokes to music. But every time I see Johnny, I'm like, oh no, he might even have been able to just do music with how good of a singer and guitar player he is. And I won't lie, a lot of times when comedians pull out guitars, I roll my eyes, but with him it feels a lot more natural, and it just works.
Yeah, and I just love him, and we worked together on multiple occasions, and I just there's such a depth to who he is, and just he's such a great thinker, and he's obviously very funny and very talented, but he is a phenomenal human being. Okay, so one of the things that and this was where I was going to go, and I wanted to talk about this with you anyway, but he brought up just, anytime, you start something new, and you already kind of alluded to this of saying like, okay, listen, my first one was at the CD club in Atlanta, and I had to make this video and all this. And so when you start something new, whatever it is, whether it's comedy, whether it's a business, whether it's, I want to learn a skill, a sport, whatever it is, you got to cut your teeth doing pretty much anything, and you have to show a lot of grit. I remember when I first started speaking, when I said, okay, I'm going to step out, leave the organization I was a part of, launch RESGEN in 2010. I just literally had to say yes to every kind of speaking opportunity I could get just to get better. I mean, I spoke at so many MOPS meetings. Yeah. I'm not but it's because, and then you're learning how to speak to different, so we've got that in common, different audiences.
MOPS crowds are good. I like the MOPS.
Yeah.
Mothers of preschoolers.
For those that don't know, I was really good at speaking to middle-aged women.
Yeah. They're a good audience.
Yeah. They also really tipped me well when I was a server at TGI Fridays. So I knew I could, that was kind of in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But anytime you start something new, you got to show a lot of grit and commitment and just whatever it takes mentality.
Yeah.
Was there a time where you were just like, I know you said like, oh, okay, that wasn't horrible, I'd like to do it again. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time though where you had to battle through I just don't know if I can do it, or if this is going to work?
Yeah. Goodness. Yeah. It's one of those things where every time you do it, I don't bomb as much now as I did when I started, but every time you do, you think, could I ever do this? Is that even possible to do? It just feels, when comedy doesn't go well, it feels like it must be impossible. Because you're just like, I feel like that should have worked. It didn't work. I don't know how to do that. You have a lot of failure, a lot of trial and error early on in stand-up specifically, but probably other things too. The good thing about stand-up is there's a show the next night, and you just got to keep getting up. And when you ask people advice about how to start stand-up, the thing almost every successful comedian is going to tell you is just get on stage. Whether it's good stage time or bad stage time, just live on stage. Bad shows, don't worry. If it doesn't go well, get back up, keep doing it, and just persist through all that. And so it definitely takes a lot of grit to start stand-up, just logistically, spending all your nights going to random places where they have a microphone and hopefully an audience for no money a lot of the time, and just show up and do your best. you know, they got the game on behind you. So you're like, are people watching me or are they watching this game? But yeah, I mean, it's a tough industry to kind of beat your way into, but it's fun at the same time. Even the bad shows are fun.
Yeah.
When you're with your friends who are funny, it's hard to have a bad time. But there's certainly nights where you're driving home just like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
But then hopefully the same week you have another show that goes great and you're like, all right, I got it. You know, it's a lot of ups and downs, and you learn to not let the horrible shows or the excellent shows affect you as much, because if you're just living on that roller coaster, you're not going to last probably. So
what are your favorite things about like doing clubs? And then I'll ask you the same thing about churches and just different venues and stuff. So like, what are some of the best things about doing clubs?
The clubs are the best. It's everybody. It's everybody at the clubs. It's all religions, all races, all ages. You know, it's a good mix. That's the best test for jokes, is a comedy club on a Saturday night and doing the jokes. And if they don't work there, I'll usually not keep them. I try not to have any jokes that only work at church or only work at a fundraiser. You know, you might have a couple of lines or something, but the clubs are the most pure form of stand-up. So it's just, I think it's really important to do them. When I say clubs, I really mean just like regular shows too, because there's so many independent shows, especially in Atlanta. There's clubs that love to do, but also every brewery has a comedy night, and then there's a restaurant has a comedy night that's, you know, 10 comedians for 10 minutes each for $10, and those are the rooms full of just regular people. Then that's the best place to work on stuff, and also usually the most fun. They're drinking, which is good. more than they drink more than they do at church.
Well, they just drink before they come to the church shows.
Yeah,
you know, this is
people drink in the parking lot. Yeah. But it's funny too. There's times you go to church and you're like, yeah, these people would have loved the show last night too, even at the comedy club. It's all just people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And churches there's such a wide variety of churches too. It's hard to even say, what's your favorite part of doing comedy at churches? I'm like, well, I don't like doing it at some of them.
Yeah.
The thing I always say is I did church one time, I won't say where, it was in Texas, and it was a volunteer appreciation night at this church, and they were literally just drinking beer in the church during the show, and I was like, this is awesome, alarming. I don't know. And then I've done a church where they got mad at me for saying the word beer.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, I don't know. You can't really say they're all the same thing.
No, they're not. You're right.
But doing shows in churches is awesome too, because it feels like home team. It feels like, all right, I know that I have these things in common with these people, and I don't have to figure them out. I might have to figure out some stuff about them, but I'm starting with a head start. I know we have this stuff in common, so I don't have to explain what a mission trip is, do my mission trip joke, or hey, they're gonna connect with where I'm coming from from a different place than maybe the random group at the comedy club last night. So it's awesome to do both. I love doing both.
So let me ask you this then, and this came from Stuart Hall, another mutual friend. I mean, you've known Stuart for a long time as well. He didn't want to know how incredible he is or whatever.
I always love that about him.
And Johnny's like, ask him this. He's like, no, I'm just kidding. But I said, forget that. I'm asking.
Yeah, I like that we answered it sincerely too. We're both like, actually, Johnny is pretty great.
Yeah. But so how do you know, like, because doing stuff in churches, like you just mentioned, is difficult because it's like, how do I know if this joke is too far? How do I know if it's not far enough? Is there such thing as too far? So how do you even wrestle with that, especially like in the church world?
Yeah. You just get good. I wish I knew. There's always stuff that I'm like, I don't know if this will work at every church. You try to do things early on in the act to get a feel for where the audience is at. And the last thing I ever want to do when somebody's hiring me to come perform at their event, the last thing I want to do is just, do something that makes the event worse.
Yeah, for sure.
Like whether it's as an artist, I can set aside a joke I like to do what I was hired to do.
Yeah.
Everybody should be capable of that.
That's a good point.
But sometimes if you genuinely don't know, there's times where I'm like, I think they might love this, but there's a 20% chance that it makes the organizer uncomfortable. So maybe that's not worth it, even if I'm pretty sure it would be everybody's favorite thing. And I don't have too much stuff that's like pushing the line horribly.
No.
I mean,
nothing I've heard.
I have one bit that I wouldn't do tonight, but it's great.
Yeah.
And I love it. And if I do it, when I do an album, it'll be on there. But it wouldn't be worth it. It's probably my favorite joke.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be worth it to do it tonight because it might offend 10 people. And then like, that's probably not worth it. If I have other stuff that will be perfectly.
Yeah.
But when I'm working for myself, when I'm doing the open mic, or if I'm doing a show for free, or there's nights, I always look at it as like, all right, tonight I'm working for someone else because they hired me to do a job, or tonight I'm working for myself because I'm showing up for $20 in chicken fingers, and I'm gonna do a good job, but I'm also gonna try some stuff.
Yeah.
And so just being aware of where I am, and just self-awareness helps a lot. But sometimes you genuinely don't know, and I've had times where I'm like, I wish I didn't do that one. And it's hard because you don't want to apologize because you still did your best.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And they usually, like, most of the people liked it, but you're like, they're probably going to get a couple of emails now, and it probably wasn't worth it. But at this point, I can usually tell what's going to be too far or not. I almost said not far enough. I don't have a lot that's...
I could have gone further on
I just don't have enough for them. But, yeah, I don't know if I answered the question. But.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing that Stuart, I thought this was a great. It's a total Stuart question, but I love it. It's he thinks that comedians are some of the best communicators on the planet and the last prophets.
The last prophets.
So, do you agree or disagree?
I do think comedians are. I think there are comedians who are some of the best communicators on the planet, without a doubt.
I agree.
Just like everything. I mean, there's some comedians that are some of the worst comedians, some communicators on the planet.
Sure.
I think that there is a class of comedians that are kind of like the modern day prophets, and it's a style almost of comedy where you're, the speak truth to power, or the George Carlin of like, I'm gonna say it like it is, and this is how the world really works, and there's something awesome. I love that. I love watching stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's also hey, let me tell you about what my wife said yesterday. And you're not really a prophet.
Right.
What I'm doing is not really
prophetic.
I don't think I have a lot of material that's like, I'm going to think about that tonight. That's a good point. Very few times after my shows, people are like, you made a really good point about that.
Although I will tell you, I went home last night, Andrew, and thought about like, my thoughts really are things that just like stay up, and then I don't.
Well, I hope there are some dumb things that people are like, that was dumb, but actually maybe true. But I think that there are comedians who do a very good job, and they're intentional of like, hey, what I'd like to talk about in a funny way are serious things. And that's why The Daily Show, is so popular. It's like, it's a comedy show, but we're talking about very serious things pretty much the whole time. And that's fun because it's high stakes, but also you die laughing at something, and then you're like, I agree with that. Whoa. Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so comedy is a powerful communication tool. So it makes sense that comedians who are very funny and are smart can use it as hey, I actually do have something to say within these jokes. So I love that. I love that type of comedy, but I also love the dumb, barely make sense, jokey comedy too.
Yeah. So who would you say, and you've mentioned a lot of names, whether they've been people that you've been quote unquote mentored by, I mean, whatever, but you just think about like your Mount Rushmore of comedy, and just people that you say, man, I just, because I think that tells a lot about like, what do you find funny, right? I mean, just like, it's always interesting to be like, well, what makes a comedian laugh, and what do you find funny? But as you think about guys and gals that you just feel like, man, I love them as comedians. They're just there. And that list is probably long, so you don't get a limit to 4. But like, just who are some of the comedians that you just are like, yeah, I like that's good stuff.
Yeah, I always have a hard time answering that because it's always, you see new people and it's great, but like, I mean, the people that I love always are like, I think Brian Regan's one of the funniest comedians of all time. So, his jokes they would still be funny if somebody else told them, but the way he tells them is just the funniest. And he was one of the first. I probably had his first album I ever had was probably his on my. I had And my Walkman, I had
You had a CD?
Brian Regan live CD.
Yeah.
I listened to it 1,000 times. He's so funny. I love Maria Bamford. I think she's one of the funniest alive. Comedians like Rory Scovel. These are not all clean comedians for those of you Googling them. Rory Scovel's, but I can't miss anything he does. He's so much improv, but also such funny written material. He did a thing in Atlanta several years ago called, the title of it was Live. It's on YouTube. It's Live Without Fear or Live Without Fear, depending on how you read it. And he did like I think it was 5 nights in a row at this club in Atlanta, where his whole idea was like, I'm going to start night 1 with 0 material. I'm only allowed to come up with stuff on stage or with the crowd. And I have to do a whole hour every night. And the next night I'm allowed to use the same thing the next night, except I can use stuff from the previous night too, if I want. And then by the end of the week, I want to see what I have. And no comedian other than him would ever dream of trying something
No kidding.
as insane as that. But he pulls it off, and they made it into like a documentary / special that's incredible. It makes me want to quit. It's so different from what I do, and so impressive, and so funny. So I love people like, there's not a lot of people like him, but I love watching what he does. I've always loved John Mulaney in college. I mean, watching John Mulaney, it's like, it's just, my stand-up's like one of my favorite things now.
Yeah.
After seeing what he was doing. I love Mike Birbiglia, storyteller.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many. I mean, I could just listen.
There really are. I mean,
Forever.
there really are. That's why I even felt, because this is another question that Stuart asked, but I think about it, I was like, man, it'd be really hard, even for me as a comedian, comedian fan, a fan of comedy, to even list, okay, here's my 4 favorites.
No, yeah, and Nate Bargatze's like, when I saw him do stand-up, I was like, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. And, if he can do it like that, maybe I could do I didn't know you could do it like that. Oh, maybe I could do that type of style or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can just name them forever. But there's so many good comedians. There's such a good time for comedy. Comedy's so popular right now, and there's more successful comedians probably than there's ever been. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. If you go to your local, 500 to 3,000 seat theater and just look at their calendar, every month there's several comedians selling out. You may never even heard of them, but they're selling out these 1,000-seat theaters because of social media mostly. And there's a lot of opportunity. People are finding the comedians that are perfect for them.
Yeah.
So much easier now because of the internet and social media. And comedians like Leanne Morgan, who was doing comedy for decades and doing fine, but all of a sudden she starts posting her clips on Facebook, and all these women her age find her and go, oh my gosh, this is our favorite thing we've ever seen. And now she has thousands and thousands of rabid fans. And before that, they would have had no way to really find her unless they just happened to go choose her at a comedy club when she was in town. And so it's really fun to see where comedy's at today, because there's kind of a comedian or a group of comedians for anybody now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the comedy's so hard because of the whole idea. Everybody finds something different funny. Right. Like whether style of jokes, style of presentation, all of that. And so there really is such a menu and a broad scope of opportunity. And the one thing I thought about as you were saying that is comedy's very, sure, there's the Nate Bargatze tour. Those tickets are a little bit higher than, than others. But you can still go to a comedy club and see somebody that you want to see for like $20. It's hard to find anything anymore that that isn't like $150 concert ticket or whatever. Yeah. And so it's accessible. It's
available at all levels. Yeah. And some of the best comedians in the world aren't famous.
Yeah.
Which is the hard part, because a lot of the worst comedians in the world are famous. I'm just kidding. Yeah. We all have opinions about who should be famous and who shouldn't.
Yeah.
But it's but you're right. There's really good comedy available at all price points. And depending on what city you're in, if you're in a city like Chicago or Atlanta or Austin or LA or New York, or there's a lot of cities that are especially have really good local comedians, and you can go see a showcase. Comedy, thankfully, now it kind of sells itself. You can just market comedy night, not even name any of the comedians. And at the Laughing Skull Lounge in Atlanta, which is kind of my home club, is mostly showcases every weekend. It's just Best of Atlanta showcase. And they sell them out every weekend for 6 shows. And it's just, you see 10 comedians doing 10 minutes. And you're going to see every type of comedian. You're going to see clean, dirty, every race, every gender, every sexual preference. And if you don't like somebody, cool, they're almost done. But by the end of the night, you're going to have seen 10 comedians. You're going to have loved some of them. and it's just a really fun night. And you know, like you said, that type of date is not that expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we need to wrap up here pretty quick, but I just got one more question, or 2 more questions, and then we'll end our time. But how often do you feed your dad material for his messages?
Not that much. He doesn't run his sermons by me as often as I'd like. He really should. Yeah, that'd be amazing. He's like, Andrew, please review the transcript for this week. I cannot do this. He's naturally funny. He doesn't need me.
Yeah.
He's got that dry humor, and he always does a good job of not being cheesy and also not being like too much trying to make jokes. There's some pastors you're like, all right, it seems like he wanted to be a comedian.
You're trying too hard.
He's slipping some gospel into his comedy acts, but no, he's doing fine in it. No. There's maybe been 1 or 2 times he's asked me about stuff, and it's fun to talk about. But.
Yeah. Okay, so how about the other way around? How much does your dad feed you your material?
He's giving me some lines. He's it's not that often, but well, a lot of times if I want to write a bit about something, especially if it's like a story from like childhood, I'll be like, hey, how do you remember this? Because I remember it like this, and so I'll ask my brother and ask my mom or my dad or my sister, and sometimes they'll remember stuff that's helpful, and I'm like, oh yeah, thank you, yeah, I should put that part. So especially when it's stuff about our family, it's helpful to talk to them about it. But every now and then, one of them will be like, what if you tried that? And they're usually everybody in my family, I would take what they say serious. They're funny enough that I'm not going to be like, oh, here we go.
And they're pretty cool with like you telling stories about them.
Yeah,
I'm
clearly.
sure Anna, I'm sure Anna, like you've had to say like, hey, do you run stuff by them and saying, I'm thinking of telling this joke and this thing. And
for a while, Anna was like, why don't you have more stuff about me? People should know that you have a fiance, wife, girlfriend.
Yeah.
No, I have plenty. She's like, all right, that's enough. They know about me now. Thanks.
So good.
No, they're all super good sports about it. Yeah. My dad's not allowed to tell me not to say. He's used me in so many sermon illustrations that I think I can kind of do whatever with him. But everybody else, I ask.
That's good. All right, I want to end our time because so you and I over breakfast this morning, we got into a really, I think, good discussion just on just how what the question that I asked you was like, why do you think that there's some of the best comedians or comedians that are so good on the stage, there's just so much, there's struggle. There's just some challenges that they have going on interpersonally. And we've seen just loss of comedians, whether it be to, addiction or just to different things. I just felt like we had such a good conversation about that and why is that? And then we were able to just say that, but that's not just in the comedian world. That's just in life.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you just like, why is that? Does it seem like there's a lot of pain sometimes within comedians?
Yeah, no, it's the sad clown thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think sometimes I think that's a stereotype, and I'm like, I don't know if we're that sad. But then you hang out with comedians, you're like, everybody's pretty sad. But I don't know. I think I think there's lots of things. I think one of the things I told you this morning is I think the people that get into comedy are already pretty weird. And so when we end up being weird, even when we're successful, it's like, well, yeah, we were kind of weird the whole time. Like we were probably going to have some problems no matter what happened to us. I think that's the case sometimes. It's like, yeah, it's the type of people that do this. But also I think there's something too about you chasing that drug of the endorphins you get when people are dying laughing at you. And I remember when I first started doing stand-up, when I started to do well, you get off stage after, killing, as we call it. It's like, I could not have gone better. The audience loved me, and you're high from it. It's like the best feeling in the world. You're like, I feel like I just went skydiving. There's so much adrenaline. I feel great. I feel so good about myself, and they love me. And then you're kind of chasing that a little bit. And if you let that be the reason you're doing things and you're always chasing that feeling, it kind of is not unlike real drugs where you get desensitized to it, but you still need it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't even make you happy anymore, but you still need it. And then it's just kind of a hard existence. Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't know that this is just my speculation, but I think that can lead to a really lonely life for people, especially the generation before mine where they're just on the road so long and it was so hard to get famous. There were less spots for fame, and you're a 10 out of 10 funny, but you're a 4 out of 10 famous, and it's just depressing.
Yeah.
And it's lonely, and it's not as, if you don't have a family or you have a bad relationship with your family and you're on the road, it's just a hard life. And drugs and alcohol become a big part of that road life too, especially for comics that are just going club to club or, night to night, one-nighters. And it's so easy to fall into all the things that come along with being good at something, having means, and having too much time on your hands. And so I think it's all those things, but
That's good.
I also think that today it's maybe I like to think today's a little bit easier to be a normal person and a comedian than maybe it used to be. But yeah, it's always really heartbreaking when you hear that one of your favorite comedians is miserable or having a hard time or struggling with mental health stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I love them and they make me so happy. I hate they're not happy. But I think there's just as many comedians that are doing great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the reality is that it's like we talked about even this morning, is that it's not just a comedy issue, or it's the human condition.
Sure.
And if we're just chasing success for success, however we define it, chasing fame, and our identity is completely wrapped up into that, and we don't have our identity wrapped into something that is, lasting and not a moving target, it's going to be very simple to go by, like what you said earlier, the high of the good show, or like, oh man, that was a horrible show, and now I'm going to have that completely impact the way that I live my life that day, or, and to where we're constantly chasing the next high, whatever that is. And we can do it in every profession we have. It's just like, if your whole world is based on your kids, well, then when your kids move out of the house, then, well, now
our whole marriage is based on this. What do we do?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
You hear it all the time.
And people, if it's on your job, you end up losing your job, or, it's about, the money stops coming in, and like, so all of that. And that's where, having that identity, that firm foundation, for lack of better words, but that foundation in Christ and understanding who you are. And that's why I loved even the way you introduced yourself is, hey, listen, my name is Andrew. Yeah, I'm a comedian. I'm a husband. I'm a Christian. Like those things are those are the things that the stand-up comedian someday may change.
Sure.
I mean, that may change for you right now. I hope it doesn't. And I hope you do this for a very long time, because you're very good at it. And I think you're going to continue to find great success. But I know from our conversations that if that were to change, that's not going to crush you, because your foundation is more as a Christian and as a husband. And those are things that aren't going to change.
Yeah. Right.
And so, I'm just, I've been greatly encouraged just by the time I've been able to spend with you. And I'm so grateful for you coming and being a part of RESGEN and what we're doing here, and being willing to be on the podcast today, and we've had multiple conversations over the last 24 hours since you've been in town. And so I'm just grateful for you. Thanks for how you do what you do to the highest level, and you do it in a way that I feel like that like we talked about even last night, to be a clean comedian takes intentionality, and you do that, and you do it very, very well. And so I'm grateful for you, bro.
No, well, that's so kind. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome to get to hang out with you this week, and love what y'all are doing here.
Yeah.
It's been a blast.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for being on the podcast. And we got one more night of date night, so you can't punch out yet.
Oh, shoot. Did we do? I'll move some flights around.
All right. Thanks, bro. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Andrew Stanley today. As always, if you did, I encourage you to share with others that may enjoy it as well. If you'd like to connect more with Andrew, you can follow him at Andrew W. Stanley on both X and Instagram. And be sure to also check out the podcast that he hosts with his friend Aaron called No Worries If Not, on all major pod platforms. All right, that's all for today. Thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others. We'll see you soon.